recording, just so
Yes.
thank you for that. So just to let everybody know that we are recording, just so we can share this with people afterwards. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm Vida Midegelow, and I'm Dean of the Doctoral School at UAL. I'm joined by Efrosini, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Efrosini Protopapa. I'm Director of Research at the place.
We're in a webinar format, which means that you'll need to use the chat function to ask your questions and to engage with us. So please just at any time pick up if you have anything that comes up, we'll just check back into the chat and pick up questions from there. And then toward the end of the session, we'll make sure you've got contacts for us. So if you want any follow-up questions or any follow-on, you've got ability to do that more directly. So please just go ahead and use that chat function. And as I said, we are recording, but that's really just for follow-on purposes, and we won't be capturing your chat. So that's for you to ask what you need to do. Anything else I need to say at this beginning point?
Just what we will cover today. So we'll speak about the partnership between UAL and the place and this program. A little reminder about what a PhD is, which I suspect most people here will have already a good understanding of. How we support researchers through this program, and then some practicalities about applying, funding, eligibility, leaving some time for your questions. So starting off, a few words about this partnership between UAL and London Contemporary Dance School at the place. UAL is the validating partner of LCDS's taught programs. And so what we have done a couple of years ago is launch this PhD program, which is based on a co-supervision model. So this means that PhD researchers are supported by a supervisor from UAL and a supervisor from the place. And the uniqueness that we are hoping we are achieving through this program is to bring together supervisors and research who are sort of embedded within these two very distinct environments. So UAL has a breadth and depth of interdisciplinary arts practice through its various colleges and institutes, and then the place has a distinct professional dance environment focusing on artistic research, the building of an artistic research culture. And what we have in common is a shared sort of focus on practice, experimentation, producing, and art with a social purpose. And we'll cover a little bit more in detail what the specific areas might be that then we are inviting through this focus. The aims of our partnership in this doctoral space is that we offer a specialist postgraduate research degree that supports inquiry into dance, choreography, embodied practice, that we develop a cross-institutional and cross-college supervisor network, a network of researchers, both supervisors and PhD students, and that over the years we might develop a very distinctive sense of a cohort of peer researchers who are focusing on these questions around dance, embodiment, and choreography. So we've got a couple of slides where we've indicated some areas, and it doesn't cover everything, but it gives you a bit of an understanding of the kinds of proposals we're inviting, where they might sit. The first one, we've grouped this list of topics under the title Creative Practice and Dance Producing in Context. So some of the things that might cover is a focus on conditions of production, contemporary contexts for creation of practice research work, practice research methodologies more broadly, critical understandings of dance. This could be through feminist, decolonial, queer approaches, questions around authorship and collaboration, improvisation, co-creative methods of making dance, participatory community dance practice, questions of accessibility, and practices that happen outdoors, perhaps linked to questions about environmental arts practice, practices with an activist sort of dimension. And finally, ethnographic approaches to dance and storytelling through dance. Then we have sort of ways in which dance might speak to other arts and other fields of knowledge, other disciplines. And this is especially the case now that we have this collaboration with UAL, which offers such a range of expertise in various arts and other adjacent fields. So we're interested, for example, in questions around the body in fashion or design, in film, video, literature, music and visual arts. Some of our colleagues work in the fields of screen dance, cinematography, video art, and documentary filmmaking. So they bring that sort of supervisory expertise. We're also interested increasingly in collaborations between art and science. And one of our most recent PhD students who started recently, for example, has a background in dance as well as pharmaceutics. So they're interested in working with the Living Systems Lab in UAL. So they're co-supervised through that expertise in UAL and more choreographic sort of support through the place. Revisiting history, archives, legacies, repertoire through a critical lens. And finally, radical pedagogy, so critical approaches to education and training in the arts and more widely. Yes, a little reminder of what a PhD is and what we expect sort of proposals to show us that they are aware of. As you know, it's a postgraduate degree. It's the most advanced level of postgraduate degree. It usually happens in 3 years or more, depending on whether you're full-time or part-time. And very importantly, it's on an original topic. You are usually supported through one or most commonly two expert supervisors. And the outcome is a thesis that presents a significant original contribution to knowledge of sufficient depth and rigor. And when we say thesis, that might take many different forms. It can be a long written document, but it might also be a combination of written and practice submission that again can take different forms. Characteristics of a PhD, as I said before, it's an original inquiry. It's a question that hasn't been asked or answered yet. It's trying to address a gap in knowledge or practice, and it aims to provide significant new insight. It is systematic. It might be drawing on different fields of knowledge, theoretical discussions, practices, relevant practices, but it always has a clear set of aims and objectives. It speaks to critical and creative questions within different contexts, and it progresses through a robust methodology. Critically, PhD students work independently, so they are supported by their supervision teams, of course also by their peers. You will find yourself working amongst other PhD students, but you might also have other peer groups that support you, artists, thinkers, people you've met along the way during your practice. And supervisors are there to support you and find depth and rigor and clarity and meet the milestones that are part of the PhD journey. But essentially, this is your own inquiry, your own project, and you are responsible for the design and the outcomes of the project.
And I wonder, just before we go straight into really thinking about support, if you'd be open to putting into the chat the kind of topics you might be interested in. I think it's always really helpful for us to understand the kind of research you want to do. So you've already heard something about the kind of work that we're interested in supporting collaboratively across our organizations. You know, that's quite a wide range of possibilities, and it's always inspiring to sort of see the kind of topics you're interested in. So whilst we go through these next few slides, you might want to just pop into the chat, give us an indication of some keywords, which is always a useful task in itself, of how do I put this vastly amorphous thing that I'm thinking of doing and I have this great passion about into a few words. But have a go at putting that into the chat for us. That would be really great to see.
And I can see, Vida, that we already have two raised hands with questions. Do we want to pause here for questions or carry through?
Absolutely.
And then,
Let's just have a quick look at them.
So maybe Julia, if you want to unmute yourself. Is that possible in the webinar format?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Hi, great. Lovely to see you both. It's a question. I think your chat's disabled, so I've put some questions in the Q&A box.
Yeah.
And it's a question really about joint PhDs. So I'm working with a brain injury colleague who's got an ABI, which is an acquired brain injury. And we'd like to do a joint PhD. Now, this might be something that we need a separate conversation about, because it might take up a lot of time to talk through it. So we were just thinking about whether or not that was a possibility in terms of doing a joint PhD.
Really interesting question. It will take a separate conversation. We don't, but you might be interested to know that Bob Worley is one of our key members of staff at UAL in the doctoral school, and she undertook the first collaborative doctoral study in the UK.
Oh, great.
So we definitely have experience in what that kind of look like in the bodies of people that are engaged in PhD supervision. What that looks like in our regulations, we'd have to have a look at and speak to you about, but certainly be interested in exploring the question with you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. That's great. Thank you.
And it seems like if our chat is disabled, not quite sure why that is.
It is not. I think it is giving people the message that it is disabled, but I can see your questions, so I'm happy to look at them. So I can see here a message that there's interest in storytelling through dance, creative practice, previously is in dance theater context, and this person is unsure about how they would combine it in a PhD, but that's their current interest. So if people can't put in their interest in the chat, maybe put it in the Q&A, and we can have a scan through through that. I think there was another raised hand earlier. If you want to put up your hand, if we haven't addressed your question, or maybe Vida can continue and you can put your questions in the Q&A box, which you find at the bottom of your screen, and I'll have a look at those.
It was literally just to say about the chat.
Okay, great, excellent. Thank you, Ellen.
Yeah. So it seems like we're using the Q&A box instead of the chat, but we get it all the same. That's great. All right, so please keep adding into there. It'd be really great to hear your thoughts and the things you're thinking of doing, combining, all those kind of interesting questions you're thinking of bringing to the table. So in terms of support we have for researchers, this programme brings the combined support of UAL and the place, as Efrosini said at the beginning. All students are registered at UAL, and so they have full access to all the systems, all the facilities, and training that's available within UAL, just like every other UAL student. And then you have the added benefit of having that support network and particular professional environment and specialist environment of the place, which Efrosini will speak to in a moment. At UAL, you'll be registered in one of our colleges, and we have multiple colleges with different kind of specialisms that you can explore online. And all those colleges are brought together through the doctoral school. So all students are both a member of their college, but also join in joint activity and training within the doctoral school. So the doctoral school is both a physical space, it's an administrative space in that team of people there see you right through from your application through awarding. So it's the same group of staff all along the way. And also a place where you are getting support and training to help you through the journey. So if you just go on to the next slide for me. So the doctoral school is just in its third year, and it's very much focused around interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary ways of knowing, giving you kind of methods and processes of what it means to become a researcher in this kind of really richly interconnected way within that wide environment of the type of research that's going on at UAL. We have core training sorry, next slide, I can see we've got a slide that says this. Our researcher development training is a structured program that takes place either online or hybrid, with a few in-person only events, for very specialist events that really require that kind of intimate exchange in person, but mainly we make a commitment to being online or hybrid. And we are working through the processes where you are able to develop the skills of what it means to become a researcher, given that becoming a researcher is the thing that not only the knowledge that you'll develop and the depth knowledge you'll develop as a candidate in your project, but actually the becoming a researcher that allows you to take that work out into the world are the things that you'll take beyond your project and into the rest of your life. So Efrosini, if you want to come in around the place.
Yes, a few things about the place for those of you who might not be as familiar with the nature of our organization is that we are a higher education provider through London Contemporary Dance School, and we also run a theatre that has a year-long program. We produce and tour dance work, and that is both nationally and internationally. And then we support artists through an artist development program, extensive program or opportunities, and help them work with local and other communities through their practice. So we offer this world-leading teaching intensive training and pedagogy alongside a wide-reaching public program. And that is what defines our small and specialist nature as an organization that combines both academic as well as industry know-how. So that is kind of the environment where you will meet us, and that is also the environment from which your supervisors will come. And some of the distinct features that we say the practice research that we support have is that it is led through practice. Not all inquiry is practice research or practice driven, but it sits very close to practice, and it looks at practice through a contemporary lens. We support dance and dance research as knowledge itself. We support the generation of knowledge about dance. And also increasingly, we're becoming interested in knowledge that might be produced through dance research, that then might be useful in other contexts, so might be transferred into other disciplines or be in dialogue with other disciplines. Which is why we claim that our research culture is one that supports multiple different ways of knowing, different practices of knowledge making, whether that is through embodied ways or cognitive, more scholarly approaches. People might have more questions about the place, sort of what kind of activities they might connect to, that I can come back to if we like.
Yeah. So the next set of slides are really all about the kind of function of how to apply on all those kind of more technical questions. So do make sure you're hanging on to those questions and thoughts about your projects and around the environment, as well as then these more technical questions in terms of process. So all of our students are expected to have usually have a 2-1 degree. A lot of our students come with a master's degree, but I think it's also worth knowing that we're really interested in thinking broadly about what it means to be ready to do a PhD, and that may or may not be captured in traditional qualifications depending on your background and your routes into a research qualification. So for instance, I myself don't have an undergraduate degree. I never did one. So there are all sorts of different ways people find their way through into research. So while these are kind of the norms, we're absolutely really interested in looking for your preparedness and your what it is that you bring particularly to the space of a degree and how you might enter that from different locations. We do, for people who don't come from a English-speaking country, we do ask you to evidence your proficiency in English. Again, that might be through having got a master's award in an English-speaking country and having to write in English, or it might be through IELTS, and we ask for a, I think I'm going to be right, 7 across the board for IELTS. Next slide, please. So our deadlines, they're coming up soon, which is why we're running this session. So the deadline for September entry is coming up in April. So just be aware of that. And for this partnership, we review all applications directly after that deadline. And we only take applications for September entries. So when you go onto the UAL web pages where you'll make your application, you'll see there are both September and each year we also then open for a January start. But for this partnership, we only are looking at September, and we look at them at the end of the application cycle. So we'll be looking for your applications essentially at the very beginning of May and doing reviews of them at that point and looking to invite you to interview from those shortlisted in those dates of the 8th and 15th of June. So just kind of keep those in mind in your processes. And you'll see on here, this email we've got on here, it'll come back later in the slides, I think, researchdegrees@arts.ac.uk. That will get you to the research degrees team at UAL, and they will take any specific questions in terms of helping you through the portal, because I must say it's not the most smooth portal to enter. So if you have questions or you come unstuck in any way with entering your application through the portal, or you're not quite sure which documents you need to upload, please do reach out to them. They're quick to respond and they're very familiar with these processes. Next slide, please. So these are our fees. You'll see that you'll also see these on the website. So we have fees for either full-time or part-time study. If you're an international student, then you will also need to apply for a visa, and that will require you to be a full-time student. Or you can study internationally as distance learner, which means that you don't come to the UK at all, but you study online. And as I said, the online provision at UAL is very much an integrated part of the offer. So there are very few things that we don't offer either full-time, that we don't offer either hybrid or online. So we have a good number of distance learning students, but that is only open to international students. There'll be some questions, I think, around that, of how that works for the place and how that really allows you to make the most benefit of being with the place. So if that's something you're thinking of, I think it's a question for us to have a conversation about, because I think it's technically possible, but might not be allow you to get the most out of the collaboration and the environment of the place. And I can see Efrosini nodding, so that's something for us to think about and have a conversation about. And also, just if you are interested, the other route to a PhD is the PhD by published work. So that's for people if you're already an established maker or researcher that has already published work or got a lot of outputs, whether they be choreographic or other kinds in the public domain. It's a space where you can bring that work together and build an argument around it and present that for a PhD. And so it's a way to kind of acknowledge the work already undertaken and to frame it as a research activity through a shorter written document. And so that's also a shorter award. But again, if you're thinking of that route, conversation is probably best because it's quite a particular route and the requirements of application are quite specific. So do reach out to us if you're interested in that route. Next slide, please. So funding's always a question. And that's always a tricky one. And it's getting, I must say, a harder landscape for funding for us all. The key UK funder has reduced their funding significantly this year. That's the Oxford Humanities Research Council. But you will find what information is available for this at these websites. So if you just put in research degrees at UAL and look at the general PhD pages, you'll find the links to these funding pages. Obviously, if you are a UK domicile student, there is the studentship government student loans, which also extends into the PhD frame. And you'll find lots of guidance in terms of alternative ways to fund PhDs, both the links through the UAL, but also if you look at sites like findaphd.com, they've got some really great advice of ways to look for funding. And if you're applying internationally, we have a lot of students that find funds through their home countries in various ways, and so that's also definitely worth exploring. So the technical things that we're looking for in terms of how to apply. So this is so just some real key basic things. Read the guidance. There's a lot of guidance online. Make sure you've had a look at it. Make sure you meet all the entry criteria. And if you're not sure, reach out to us on that email that I just shared with you. Just ask us. We're always willing to have a conversation about, what is equivalence, because that's a word that comes up quite a lot. What's an equivalent to, and what's acceptable? So because we're really interested in seeing applications from a wide group of people that may or may not come through traditional routes. If you have a particular project in mind and you're some way on with your proposal, and we'll speak about that in a moment, you are absolutely invited to reach out to a potential supervisor. And so you might reach out to somebody at the place, and Efrosini can talk a bit about that in a moment, or you might reach out to somebody at UAL or both. But please, when you do that, let us know who you've reached out to, so we can combine our engagement with you. It's much better for us to be doing that from early on in the process. But equally, if you're not comfortable reaching out to somebody, or you don't know how to reach out, but you've got a real strong idea, please just put an application in and we will look for the appropriate supervision for you. It's not always easy, particularly at UAL when there's a vast number of staff to research through who may or may not be engaged in supervision. So we will do that work for you. If you make an application, we will absolutely map you to supervisors. So please don't feel like you have to have done that before your application, particularly given the deadline we're currently at, and we're fairly close to it, and staff might find it tricky to get good feedback to you at this point. And we also have a video online at UAL about preparing your proposal, and so please do have a look at that if you're interested in getting a bit more guidance about what your proposal should look like. Next slide, please. So that's just what it's saying. So there's all this guidance online, there's both the PDF that you can download in terms of how to write a proposal, but equally a video there that is really worth watching, that really sets out what a proposal might look like. And we also have a webinar coming up, and I'm going to ask Lynn shortly if you can just share with us, is that webinar coming up, or is that still something people can sign up for, Lynn? Oh, flicking through slides.
Sorry, trying to unmute myself.
Oh.
Yes, it's still available. I'll put all the links in the chat when I can access things again. Thank you.
Fab. Thank you very much. So we'll share a link to that webinar that will give you more guidance. Again, that's going to run, that webinar will run a little bit more like a flipped session. So it'd be ideal if you'd watch the video first, get all the basic information about what a proposal requires, and then attend the session, which will be a much more interactive and discursive session. So that's really worth going to. Whether you're thinking you're coming to us or going somewhere else, it's probably useful to attend that session. All right, the other routes for application, we do accept students from other institutions. It's fairly usual if somebody's supervision teams have changed, or if you're looking for a different kind of environment. Again, speak to us about that. And I've already spoken about the route through the PhD by published works. Again, reach out if that's a different route. These are kind of alternative routes beyond the standard, and we can look at those out of cycle also. Next slide, please. So, as I say, you apply through the UAL portal, which is on the How to Apply page on that link. As I say, the portal is a little clunky, so just work through it nice and steadily. There are a lot of documents you will need to upload to it. And a really important piece in there, and it does remind you in the portal, but please add this statement of London Contemporary Dance School / UAL into the programme. When you're asked for the title of your project in the application portal, put that piece of information in alongside your title. That allows us to just pull out these applications nice and smoothly and make sure you're being reviewed by the right people, rather than getting lost within the broader application process. So just remember to do that. Next slide, please. All right, so we are on sort of questions. So if we turn back to our
I have been going through these.
Right.
Can I just check, can you see each other's comments in the Q&A section? Can people see each other's writings? Yes, okay, great, excellent. So there are a few questions here which we have partly or fully covered. One was whether it's necessary to identify supervisors in advance. As Vida said, you don't have to. I would say it's always sort of good practice to look into who is available to supervise at each institution. I would say from the places side, it's a small pool of people. If you go to the web page about our PhD program on the place website, and I can post the link below here. You can see available supervisors. Oh, thanks, Lynn. And sort of look into their fields of study, their research interests, what they would be able to supervise. You can indicate who you'd like to work with, either from the place or from UAL. And I'm aware, UAL has a much more extensive pool because there are different colleges and institutes. But as Vida said, we will also try to help you identify supervisors, and it might transpire post-interview that actually your area would sit better with one supervisor or another, and we will help refine that process. There was a question about the PhD by published works, which, as Vida said, we can support through this specific program. And I can also say from our side, one of our supervisors, Katrina McPherson, has herself completed a PhD by published works and recently did a research piece on that. So reflecting on her practice of doing a PhD by published works, in that instance, practice works. So we have experience, I think, across institutions to do that, but maybe if there are more specific questions, I think, would we go with the same deadline, Vida? There's a different application process, I think, and interview process with that. So, maybe that's a separate conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be ideal if somebody was ready to do it within the same cycle, but we do accept people through that route outside of the normal application cycles. But obviously that is something it's much easier for us to manage, just on a purely selfish level, if it comes in along with the others. It also means that you're involved in all the inductions and all the training falls in cycle, but you might need slightly different things as a published works candidate, because by the very nature of being ready to do a published works, that actually means that you're already in many ways an established researcher. So there's lots of knowledges that you already be bringing that perhaps mean that you don't need quite some of the training that's available. It would be a different kind of program.
Yeah, in terms of not being based in London, you can definitely, do a PhD without being based in London through this route. I think the remote learning option that Vida outlined in the slide is a very particular one, which I think is also connected to some visa regulations about not actually visiting the site, but that's a different inquiry. With a PhD program, it's about how you are managing your own practice, which might be based elsewhere in the UK. And as long as you meet regularly with your supervisors in person or remotely, that the work can progress. In terms of the environment of the place, which is something you brought up, Vida, with somebody not being based sort of in proximity to the place, I mean, you can plan to visit us at times when there are events happening. We welcome PhD students to our research cafes, where you can also, as a PhD student, present work and receive feedback. Those are very informal spaces for exchange between staff and researchers and PhD students. Of projects in progress, I would say. Those we also facilitate a hybrid option with those, so you would be able to take part in those as well. And we do have taught programs that are delivered online. So, we are familiar with holding events online, educational and other artist development webinars, etc. So it would be more what do you need to support your own project and whether you can access those opportunities remotely. Decision about which college, I think that would largely depend on supervisor, right? Because it depends.
Yes. Yes. So essentially what happens at within UAL and this partnership is that technically your lead supervisor, so your director of study, so you'll hear the acronym DOS, is the person who you'll be aligned to the college that they're in. So if there's a particular member of staff that you really want to work with, then you will need to apply to that college. If you, as I say, as Efrosini pointed out though, often when we come to interview and we're talking with you, we can really help and open up what's the right type of supervision. And that might mean that even though you apply to one college, we might suggest you move to another in order to get the right kind of supervision. And also, there is lots of crossovers between colleges in terms of facilities and students, but technically you will be aligned to one college where your DOS is based.
Is this PhD eligible for HRC fully funded doctoral landscape studentships offered by UAL?
So the landscape studentships you'll see they're about to be advertised, but they are all with a specific partner. So they are not open awards to any topic. So do look out for those though. But it will require you to be addressing a particular partnership, and they do come with particular supervisors. So there's certainly something for you to look out for, but they wouldn't be ones that we can be doing within this particular partnership with London Contemporary. So you'll see when you see them advertised, they are named projects around the theme broadly of placemaking.
Great. There's a question about interviews. Those tend to happen online, so you don't need to be in person in June for those. And Vida, a question about in terms of online distance learning, how often is a PhD student required to come to the UK for meeting?
Yeah.
It's quite the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually quite the opposite. So if you register as an online student, so distance learning online, you actually are not able to come into the UAL buildings for supervision. So it would be expected that you are doing all your education online.
Great. I think we've answered all of those. Any advice for someone who knows what their specific interests are but is unsure about how to work them in a PhD context? That's exactly what you have to get right in a proposal. So I'm glad this question has been articulated in this way. I think the training, the writing a proposal session that's pre-recorded and online via YouTube is very helpful in that respect. I remember seeing some guidelines in a PDF document.
There
Are
is
those also?
also a
Yes.
PDF to download. So if you go onto the How to Apply pages, there's a downloadable PDF as well as the video recording of that process. And I say if I think a lot of it is really, you've got this, it's not uncommon, you've got this great curiosity and passion about something, something either a particular people you want to make a difference to, or something that's been bubbling up for a while in your practice and you're really wanting to sort of dig into it, but you're not quite sure how to frame it. The structure of a proposal, the doctoral application proposal, really asks you to start to frame that in terms of, well, what kind of questions? How am I going to frame those as questions? What work has already been done in this field is the next step of that. It's kind of going, actually, I'm not the only person who's been asking these questions in and through their work or in written work, and you're not expected to know everything. So don't feel like you have to know the whole field at this point, but you have to be able to say, oh, well, this is what I'm aware of that's gone on. This is the work, the practices, or these are the things I've read that I can connect it. And you need to think about how you're going to go about it, which is essentially what method and methodology are. So how are you going to go about asking these questions, either through your practice or through gathering data and insights from other people, through doing field work, through your own making. So how are you going to go about doing it? And they're the kind of core things, essentially, that a research proposal asks you to consider. So what are the questions? What else has been done in this field already that means that you're aware of, that your questions are ones that, you're not the only person out there asking them, but both historically and in a contemporaneous sense, that other people are doing it, and then how are you going to go about asking those questions? It doesn't have to be perfect. This is the beginning of a process. We're really interested in showing a enthusiasm for the topic, some kind of background that gives you the expertise to begin entering that project. And it might be that you're also identifying things that will be brand new to you and that you're going to be needing to open up as new territories through the project. And that you're open to really developing those skills as you go. So don't feel like you have to know it all at the beginning.
Which is why, identification of supervisors or colleges might not be as possible for some projects as for others. So I think we've answered that question, but there was also an inquiry about whether you might change college. So you might start thinking that you might be based in London College of Fashion, and then something changes in your work, and actually maybe the environment of I don't know, Central St. Martin's seems more suitable, and you shift supervisor and college. Somebody's Wi-Fi got interrupted and they just wanted to check. Can you share with us again the choice of college during the application? So any college, but I'm not sure if this relates to Vida's comment about in that field within the application, identifying that this is for the LCDS/UAL partnership. But other than that, any of the colleges, right? Or institutes or institutes of UAL.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question. a question about recommendation letters and people who are close to completing their studies but haven't yet. So I'm a second-year graduate student scheduled to graduate this year. My supervisor is unable to provide a recommendation letter until the application deadline, which is coming soon. And can their recommendation letter be submitted a bit later, or will this affect their application?
That would be a question, I'm afraid, for our research degrees question. So just drop an email to researchdegrees@arts.ac.uk. They will be able to answer all those kind of really detailed technical questions, because there are some regulations around when you've got evidence of your certification and things like that, in relationship to it, depending on where you're applying from. So just drop them a quick email in relationship to that. So I don't want to misadvise you.
Right. I don't see, I think, any other questions. If your question hasn't been answered, please type it again. I think we've worked through them now. And even though you can't type in the chat, I can see that Lynn has been posting useful information there, links to the proposal writing webinar and PDF that we spoke about, funding opportunities, and the email address, the generic research degrees at UAL email address. Can people see the chat even though they're unable to type in the chat? And question about the joint PhD, who should they contact them? So Julie at the beginning asking about doing a joint PhD. I guess it would be the same question for the PhD by published works, who to contact to discuss that particular scheme.
The joint PhD, probably best just to come straight to me, because it's quite an interesting and juicy challenge we'd love to take up with you. So send that one to me and I'll see what we can do with it. And I really love to see whether we can find a way to support that. It will be new for us, but we'd love to find a way to do it. So send that one to me. And around the published works, that either can come to probably either to myself or Efrosini, I would think. Or indeed, if you have a particular supervisor in mind, they could equally go to them. But if there are technical questions about the submission elements of it and how to work the portal and what technical things to submit, that will be to the generic research degrees. If it's more about the topic and how to start to think about framing works that you already have in the public domain and whether they will constitute a PhD, probably Efrosini or I.
Yes, so I remember that there was an associated question with this inquiry about whether you can submit with existing work, portfolio of existing practice. Definitely, that is essentially what the PhD by published works is. You have built a body of work, whether through published material or artwork that has been presented, and you have documentation of that. You might have both, and so then you select a sort of a range that becomes a portfolio and accompanied with a contextualizing written piece. So it's, yeah, exactly as Vida said, it's for more mature sort of researchers. We do envisage, there is a question about whether the program will be available for next year. We do envisage that we will run it again next year, but it will be only entry in September again. So similarly to this year, applications in April 28 for a start date in September 28. That would be
scary, isn't it?
Sounds like a long time away, but given, sometimes ideas are quite formed and you're ready to put them on the page and they fit quite easily into the framework of a PhD proposal. Other times it just takes a little bit longer to just shape them through the requirements of a PhD proposal. I can see that the chat is also enabled now for people, so you can use either the Q&A or the chat if you have any other questions or comments. I think we've got some really nice examples of the types of work and practices that people are interested, working between sort of dance and visual arts contexts, museums, galleries, and the object-body relationships. We have people interested in film and screen-based choreography and how that shapes understandings and perceptions of age. In work inspired by Bhutto and diasporic Hong Kong communities in the UK, looking at that through somatics and migration studies. There are some really great sort of examples of types of inquiry that sit firmly within dance and a commitment to sort of embodied understanding, but reach out into other fields of knowledge, study, contexts, and different expertise. So that's really lovely. Thank you for posting all of those inquiries, everyone. Shall we pause in case there are any other questions about the program, the context, practicalities? Great.
Great. Fantastic.
Good. Okay. Seems like people have taken a lot. Or feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. But as Vida said, you can also digest this material. Maybe some of you are going to the other UAL events and reach out to us if you have any other questions. Great.
Great.
Okay, thank you everyone. And the recording from this session will also be available if you want to revisit any bit of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Hopefully you grabbed the...
Oh, there is a hand, I think. Elspeth?
Hi, can you hear me? Am I
Yes.
going through? All right. Thank you, everyone, for organizing this information section. It's really helpful. And I just want to raise a final question about the Doctoral Landscape Award, because it is mentioned earlier that there will be like specific supervisor or specific kind of the directions to take for this award. Like I know that will be around mid-March that more information will be released, but about what time will the result be announced? And how does it work with the application schedule and interview and all this as well? Thank you.
So those landscape awards, and indeed UAL also have some internal funding. So in total there'll be 7 funded studentship places available, but they're all being treated in the same way. They are running a little bit behind this normal application schedule. So you will need to look, but you will be able to, they'll be advertised before we obviously get to the end of April. So you'll be able to see whether there is anything in there that you think is appropriate for you to apply to before this deadline, before this general deadline meets. So I really strongly just ask you to read those. We are hoping to advertise them in the next 2 weeks. So have a look at them, have a look at the supervisory teams, look at the projects, and then really see whether you feel like you've got something to bring to that space. The nature of those because they've been essentially designed by UAL staff in relation with a partner. They are covering a whole range of different kind of disciplinary areas of UAL, but they are also designed to mean that you can bring different types of research, different ways of researching to the table in the way that you approach them. So just have a look at them. But the deadline for those is running slightly after these. So you'll have this April deadline, and then those, I think, I can't remember the exact deadline, I'm afraid, off the top of my head, but it's going to be a May deadline, I think, for those.
Thank you, all good. Yep.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks everybody. I'll finish that there. So everybody's happy.
Yeah. Yep, thank you very much, everybody. And we look forward to seeing your applications.
Thank you.